Chapter 6 of the Firm of Girdlestone by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Ashton Hoffman. A Rectorial election. It took some little time before his son, who was half choked with laughter, could explain to the energetic doctor that the gentleman upon whom he was perched was not a dangerous lunatic, but on the contrary a very harmless and innocent member of society. When at last it was made clear to him, the doctor released his prisoner, and was profuse in his apologies. "This is my father, Garraway," said Dimmesdale. "I hardly expected him so early." "I must offer you 1,000 apologies, sir. The fact is that I am rather short-sighted, and had no time to put my glasses on. It seemed to me to be a most dangerous scuffle." "Don't mention it, sir," said Garraway, with a great good humour. "And you, Tom, you rogue, is this the way you spend your mornings? I expect to find you deep in your books. I told your landlady that I hardly liked to come up for fear of disturbing you at your work. You go up for your first professional in a few weeks, I understand." "That will be all right, Dad," said his son demurely. "Garraway and I usually take a little exercise of this sort as a preliminary to the labours of the day. Try this armchair and have a cigarette." The doctor's eyes fell upon the medical works and the disarticulated skull, and his ill humour departed. "You have your tools close at hand, I see," he remarked. "Yes, Dad, all ready. Those bones bring back old memories to me. I am rusty in my anatomy, but I dare say I could stump you yet. Let me see now. What are the different foramina of the sphenoid bone, and what structures pass through them? Coming near his son, coming, and dashed out of the room. "I didn't hear anyone call," observed the doctor. "Did you, sir?" said Garraway, pulling on his coat. "I thought I heard a noise." "You read with my son, I believe." "Yes, sir." "Then perhaps you can tell me what the structures are which pass through the foramina of the sphenoid." "Oh, yes, sir. There is the— All right, Tom, all right. Excuse me, sir. He is calling me." Garraway vanished as precipitately as his friend had done. The doctor sat alone, puffing his cigarette and brooding over his own dullness of hearing. Presently the two students returned, looking just a little shamefaced, and plunged instantly into the wild talk about the weather, the town, and the university. Anything and everything except the sphenoid bone. "I have often wished to see something of it," his father answered. "I was apprenticed to my profession, Mr. Garraway, in the old-fashioned way, and had a few opportunities of attending college." "Indeed, sir. But I can't imagine at all what can be more charming than the sight of a community of young men, all striving after knowledge, and emulating each other in the order of their studies. Not that I would grudge them recreation. I can fancy them strolling in bands round the classic precincts of the venerable university, and amusing themselves by discussing the rival theories of theologists, or the latest addition to the pharmacopoeia." Garraway had listened with becoming gravity to the commencement of this speech, but at the last sentence he choked and vanished for the second time out of the room. "Your friend seems amused," remarked Dr. Dimmesdale mildly. "Yes, he gets taken like that sometimes," said his son. "His brothers are just the same. I have hardly had a chance yet to say how glad I am to see you, Dad." "And to see you, my dear boy. Your mother and Kate come up by the night train. I have private rooms at the hotel." "Kate Hartson? I can only remember her as a little quiet girl, with long brown hair. That was 6 years ago. She promised to be pretty." "Then she has fulfilled her promise, but you shall judge that for yourself. She is the ward of John Girdlestone, an African merchant, but we are the only relations she has upon earth. Her father was my second cousin. She spends a good deal of her time now at the Fillmore Gardens, as much as her guardian will allow. He prefers to have her under his own roof, and I don't blame him, for she's like a ray of sunshine in the house. It was like a drawing his teeth to get to consent to this little holiday. But he stuck at it until I wearied him out, fairly wearied him out. The little doctor chuckled at the thought of his victory and stretched out his thick legs towards the fire. This examination will prevent me from being with you as much as I wish. That's right, my boy. Let nothing interfere with your work. Still, I think I'm pretty safe. I am glad they have come now, for next Wednesday is the international football match. Gary Way and I are the two Scotch halfbacks. You must all come down and see it. I'll tell you what, Dimmesdale, said Gary Way, appearing at the doorway. If we don't hurry up, we shall see nothing of the election. It is close on 12. I am all ready, cried Dr. Dimmesdale, jumping to his feet and buttoning his coat. Let us be off then, said his son, and picking up hats and sticks, they clattered off down the lodging-house stairs. The Rectorial election is a peculiar Scottish institution, and however it may strike the impartial observer, it is regarded by the students themselves as a rite of extreme solemnity and importance, from which grave issues may depend. To hear the speeches and address of rival orators, one would suppose that integrity of the Constitution and the very existence of the Empire hung upon the return of the special nominants. 2 candidates are chosen from the most eminent of either party, and a day is fixed for the polling. Every undergraduate has a vote, but the professors have no voice in the matter. As the duties are nominal and the position honorable, there is never any lack of distinguished aspirants for the vacancy. Occasionally some well-known literary or scientific man is invited to become the candidate, but as a rule the election is fought upon strictly political lines, with all the old-fashioned accompaniments of a parliament contest. For months before the great day there is a bustle and a stir. Secret committees meet, rules are formulated, and insidious agents prowl about with an eye to the political training of those who have not yet nailed their colors to any particular mast. Then comes a great meeting of the Liberal Students' Association, which is trumped by a dinner of the undergraduates' Conservative Society. The campaign is then in full swing. Great boards appear in the university gates on which pithy satires against one or other candidate, parodies on songs, quotations from the speeches, and gradually painted cartoons are posted. Those who are supposed to be able to feel the pulse of the university move about with the weight of much knowledge upon their brows, throwing out hints as to the probable majority one way or the other. Some profess to know it to a nicety, others shake their heads and remark vaguely that there is not much to choose either way. So week after week goes by until the excitement reaches a climax when the date of the election comes round. There was no need upon that day for Dr. Dimmesdale or any other stranger in town to ask his way to the university, for the whooping and yelling which proceeded from the usual decorous building might have been heard from Princes Street to Newington. In front of the gates was a dense crowd of townspeople peering through into the quadrangle and deriving much entertainment from the movements of the lively young gentlemen within. Large numbers of the more peaceable undergraduates stood about under the arches. These quickly made a way for the newcomers, for both Garway and Dimmesdale, as noted athletes, command a respect among their fellow students, which medalists and honors men might look for in vain. The broad open quadrangle and all the numerous balconies and terraces which surrounded it were crowded with an excited mob of students. The whole 3,000 old electors who stand upon the college rules appeared to be present, and the noise which they were making would have reflected credit on treble the number. The dense crowd surged and seethed without pause or rest. Now and again some orator would be hoisted up the shoulders of his fellows, when the oscillation of the crowd would remove his supporters, and down he would come until to be succeeded by other at some other part of the assembly. The name of either candidate would produce roars of applause and equal vigorous howls of execration. Those who were lucky enough to be in the balconies above hurled down missiles on the crowd beneath, peas, eggs, potatoes, and bags of flour or of sulphur, while those below, wherever they found room to swing an arm, returned the fusillade with interest. The doctor's views of academical serenity and the high converse of pallid students vanished into thin air as he gazed upon the mad, tumultuous scene. Yet in spite of his 50 years he laughed as heartily as any boy at the wild pranks of the young politicians, and the ruin which was wrought upon broadcloth coat and shooting jacket by the hail of unsavory projectiles. The crowd was most dense and most noisy in front of the classroom, in which the counting of the votes was going forward. At 1 the results was to be announced, and as the long hand of the great clock crept towards the hour, a hush of expectation fell upon the assembly. The brazen clang broke harshly out, and at the same moment the folding doors were flung open, and a knot of men rushed out into the crowd, who swirled and eddied around them. The center of the throng was violently agitated, and the whole mass of people swayed outwards and inwards. For a minute or two the excited combatants seethed and struggled with a clue as to the cause of the commotion. Then the corner of a large placard was elevated above the heads of the rioters, on which was visible the word "Liberal" in great letters. But before it could be raised further, it was torn down, and the surge became fiercer than ever. Up came the placard again, and the other corner was on this time, with the word "Majority," but it immediately vanished as before. Enough had been seen, however, to show which way the victory had gone, and shouts of triumph arose everywhere, with the waving of hats and the clatter of sticks. Meanwhile, in the center of the two parties fought round the placard, and the commotion began to cover a wider area, as either side was reinforced by fresh supporters. Gigantic Liberals seized the board and held it aloft for a moment so that it could be seen in its entirety by the whole multitude. Liberal majority 241. But his triumph was short-lived. A stick descended upon his head, his heels were tripped up, and he and his placard rolled upon the ground together. The victors succeeded, however, in forcing their way to the extreme end of the quadrangle, whereas every Edinburgh man knows the full-length statue of Sir David Brewster looks down upon the classic ground, which he loved so well, and ordinary radicals swarmed up upon the pedestal and balanced the obnoxious notice on the marble arms of the professor. Thus converted into a political partisan, the reverend inventor of the kaleidoscope became the center of a fierce struggle, the vanquished politicians making the most desperate effort to destroy the symbol of their opponent's victory, while the others afforded an equal vigorous resistance to their attacks. The struggle was still proceeding when Dimmesdale removed his father, for it was impossible to say what form of the riot might assume. "What Goths with what barbarians!" cried the little doctor as they walked down the bridge. "And this is my dream of refined quiet and studious repose." "They are not always like that, sir," said the son apologetically. "They are certainly a little jolly today." "A little jolly!" cried the doctor. "You rogue, Tom! I believe if I had not been there you would have been their ringleader." He glanced from one to the other, and it was so evident from the expressions of their faces that he had just hit the mark that he burst into a great guffaw of laughter, in which, after a moment's hesitation, the two young companions hurriedly joined. End of chapter 6.